Okay, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you're joining us from Baltimore. My name is Josh Sussman. I'm with the marketing and program team at Nefesh B'Nefesh. About 15 years ago, we at Nefesh B'Nefesh did a program called Letters to Home. And when things used to get printed and put on shul bulletin boards or tables in the Kiddush hall, we did, I don't know, like 15 to 20 families who wrote their stories. They're all published on nice glossy bifold things. We sent them out to shuls and federations in their home communities. And that had legs for a couple years, 3 years, 4 years. I think they actually kept getting used. And that was that project. That was 15 years ago or so. And as we were thinking about some new ideas for programming this year, we decided to modernize that and do video letters from home. And that brings us to this evening, this afternoon for you in Baltimore. We want people to be able to hear from people like them, people who have come from their community, people who have preceded them to Israel over the last few years. We have, since last March when we were all kind of shut down, we pivoted to a completely virtual programming. We used to do about 75 to 100 trips a year to America and Canada, with my colleagues traveling and meeting with people and doing seminars. And we immediately pivoted last March 15th, and we've had about 50,000 people register for programs since then. As many of you may know, there's been a tremendous increase in interest in Aliyah over the last year. People have thought about their lives a little bit differently, prioritized. We've had a lot of people who were on a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan who have kind of moved up their plans to a 1-year or 2-year plan or a 5-year plan as part of the reprioritization. And this opportunity for you to hear from Moline, people from Baltimore, people who know the towns, know the Knish shop, know the shuls. I myself met Aliyah 17 years ago from Potomac. I went to graduate school in Baltimore, so I have a little familiarity with the area. But I'm very happy to have with us both the Rasmusses and the Grants today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they can do it much better than I. And then we'll continue. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, which I'll be monitoring, and I'll be happy to throw the questions out to our guests, whichever one it may be, or both. So let's start with the Grants. Introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your story, and we'll move on. Thanks.
I'm Abraham Grant. We made Aliyah a little bit over 4.5 years ago. We live in Malot Daphna, which is in the heart of it's not that far from Mea Shearim. I'm sure a lot of people recognize the Mea Shearim area, the Base Israel area. So that's the part of town that we live in. We are blessed to be a 40-minute walk away from the Kotel, and Baruch Hashem, in the area we're in, we're able to host a lot of yeshiva people, a lot of seminary girls. We're able to have over, and we have really very much been enjoying our move here to Eretz Israel.
So I'm Marcia Grant. I'm actually working here in Eretz Israel. My husband is retired, but I'm not. When I came to Eretz Israel, I was working for an American company. I worked for an American company until January, when I was laid off due to COVID. Baruch Hashem, with the help of Nefesh B'Nefesh, actually, I was able to pivot, and I got a job within about a week and a half here in Eretz Yisrael. So I work in Kiryat Sefer. So I commute from Yerushalayim to Kiryat Sefer every day, and I work for a wonderful company, and it's great. That's very nice. We have a son who lives across the street from us. He and his wife and Kanina have their 10 kids, and we have a son who lives in Bnei Brak with their 9 kids. That's us.
Wow. Bear and Sarah?
So first of all, I just want to say, if I may start off, that it's really, really, really cool to be on this side of this discussion, because for many years, 2,000 years, we dreamed to be here. And so I just want to really start out by giving a shout out to Nefesh B'Nefesh, because we literally would not be here without Nefesh B'Nefesh. They've been absolutely amazing. And the very fact that we're here to talk to this group is really because of Nefesh B'Nefesh. So thank you. My name is Meir Raskis. This is my wife, Sarah. We have been here in Israel for a little bit over a year and a half. We're living in a place called Neve Daniel, which is in Gush Etzion, across the valley from Efrat and up the hill from Josh. And I am I continue to work my US job. I work in commercial real estate. We have an office here in Tel Aviv. So I commute in, a couple times a week and work from home and work from Tel Aviv. And we have 3 children here, and they're doing really, really well. They've, I think, acclimated rather well. We'll talk about that a little more in detail. I think this is just opening remarks. I'm going to pass it over to Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Raskis. Like Mayor said, we moved about a year and a half ago. We are in Neve Daniel and love it. I run a prosthetic company actually in the States. So my hours tend to be late night after the kids go to sleep and sporadic during the day whenever I can fit it in, which leaves my mornings free to teach kickboxing and personal train, which is something that I picked up over Corona. I decided to do something to keep me fit and got certified as a personal trainer. And that's now something that I never knew I loved, but it's something I'm able to work on here as well.
Wow, cool. Sarah and Mayor, do you have any other family here in Israel?
Yes. I actually have my whole family here, at least on my dad's side. I have Kanai grandparents living in Rehavia. I have aunts and uncles all around Jerusalem, first cousins, and all 3 of my younger brothers live here. My parents will, in Eretz Hashem, at some point join us. But for right now, they are holding down the fort still in Baltimore.
I just have a brother here.
Well, yeah, your brother comes with family, though. Your brother and your nephew.
My brother and his 8 children. And I have a nephew here as well. That's right. And I have extended family. I have a cousin here in Neve Daniel too. And my wife has cousins in Neve Daniel too. So we're fortunate to be surrounded by family.
Grant, you guys mentioned you have your 2 kids here, or did you leave any family back in the States?
Yeah, so we have 2 children also in the States, a daughter in Lakewood and a son in Minneapolis. And I have a brother in Silver Spring and a brother in Baltimore. And my husband has a brother in Atlanta and a bunch of nephews in Atlanta. So yeah, we have plenty of family back in the States.
You guys are covering the country.
We're all over the place, yeah.
We like to bring obviously people who are happy and successful and acclimating well here in Israel. We also don't want to sugarcoat anything. This is real life in a real country. It's not North America. How I would like to speak to the challenges of you obviously have kids here and you have grandchildren across the hallway, and but can you speak to the challenge of maintaining your engagement with your kids that are kids and the rest of your family who are left behind in the States?
So yeah, it's challenging, right? I mean, especially with COVID. So back in the day, pre-COVID, when I was working for an American company, I used to go to America every 3 months, which gave me the opportunity to see all of our friends in Baltimore and to see all of our kids and grandchildren and, extended family. But of course, when COVID came, that was the end of that. So it has been challenging to keep up communications with everybody. And I feel one of the hardest things in terms of making Aliyah is leaving people behind, leaving family behind, leaving friends behind. That is difficult. We've tried to maintain, all of our relationships as much as possible, but you're going to miss things. I missed a bar mitzvah. My oldest great nephew was bar mitzvah in February. Obviously, I missed it. You're going to miss things. We have a granddaughter in Lakewood that we've never seen yet. That is one of the very hard things about making Aliyah. You cannot be at all the simchas. You are going to miss things.
That's the beauty of Zoom. Hopefully more Simchas are on Zoom than they used to be.
So there is that, right? So Baruch Hashem for that, right? But of course, it isn't the same thing as
No,
being
not
there.
obviously not. I'm kind of joking. At
Yeah,
least a
but
little bit.
kaka. That's how the cookie crumbles there. But at least Baruch Hashem, we're able to be here for all the simchas that are on this side. When we lived in America, so we missed the ones on this side. So that's how that goes.
And have you found that as the world, I'll throw this to both of you, as the world kind of virtualized itself over the last year, if some of that distance might have been closed a little bit, because we just did a session a little while ago also, and one of the guys said, you know, I pick up my phone, I'm on the phone with whoever I want to be, and I never realized the distance. He happens to be in the States now for work. So the distance didn't hit me until I got back on a plane to go. And I was like, wow, 18 hours to LA, this is really far away. It's not like just picking up the phone. Have you found that this past year's experience has helped close that gap a little bit, because tools that are at our disposal that maybe people weren't familiar with or weren't comfortable with pre-corona maybe made some of that distance a little easier? Sarah, you got something to say?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. I think it definitely has benefited the widespread use of Zoom, WhatsApp video. I know for my kids, when we moved a year and a half ago, a big adjustment for them was getting used to the fact that their grandparents weren't around the corner. And we had to start with video chats, and it was hard for them and it was frustrating for them because it wasn't the same. And then 6 months into our Aliyah, the whole world went on Zoom, and their neighbors they were talking to on WhatsApp video also, because they weren't having physical contact with anybody, even the friends across the street. And I think it really normalized it. And Baruch Hashem, we were so fortunate. My parents actually came for Pesach this year. And my kids jumped right back into that relationship. It really didn't feel as though there had been any distance, because for the past year, they've gotten used to that Zoom lifestyle. And my daughter, my 11-year-old daughter actually said to me, she said, I miss my friends. I miss sitting in a room with them, but I don't feel like I'm missing their lives because I know what's going on, which was interesting. She misses the people, but she's not having that feeling of missing out. I mean, she's also not at that I missed everybody's bat mitzvah stage. That'll come soon. But I think at least for the younger kids who it became so part of their daily existence with school and with socializing, I think it has helped.
Right. Along the same lines, Marcia, you started for what sounds like about 3.5 years working remotely. Both Sarah and Mayor work remotely. That's something that we at NAFIS are seeing more of. There's always been people that work remotely. There's a lot of people that commuted. The commuting obviously stopped this year. Marcia, can you compare your experiences working remotely for an American company versus what how your life kind of shifted a little bit once you started working here in Israel?
So it is extremely different. So when I was working remotely, much like Sarah was talking about, so the hours are a little interesting, right? I didn't work full American hours, more full Israeli hours when I worked remotely. I started about 11 o'clock in the morning and I worked like till 8 o'clock at night. So I kind of had the best of both worlds in there, but the relationships are just really not the same. Also, I mean, to be quite honest, when I worked in America, I was working with, non-Jewish people. It's a very different environment. Here in Eretz Yisrael, I'm actually working for a company. It's called City Book in Kiryat Sefer. They actually have branches in Yerushalayim, in Bnei Brak, in Kiryat Sefer, in, let's see, where else? Also in Beitar and Svat. They have branches all over the country. And it's a mostly religious company. It's actually a branch of a company in Lakewood. It's called Madison Title. And being actually in person is amazingly fun. It's actually one of the reasons why I took this job. I had the potential for 2 other remote jobs in America, but I chose this one because I really wanted to be together with human beings again. And I wanted to work in Israel. And the fact that here they have, for the women, they have Rosh Chodesh programs every month. It's a completely different environment. It's super fun working with other Jewish people. We're all on the same schedule. We all have the same lifestyle. We can all relate to the same things. It's part of the beauty and the joy of living in Eretz Yisrael is that you're among everybody that's Jewish. And now I get to carry that besides, my living environment, I get to carry that into my work environment as well, which is really amazing. And I enjoy it tremendously.
And you get to work. You get to work for Eli Kashdan. That's extra bonus.
You know him.
Very well. Yeah.
Oh,
I was
that's
gonna
very
say
funny.
it's amazing. You're one of the few people in the world that went from working remotely to working in person over the last year. You like
I know,
completely
right?
flipped the entire world.
I am a total unicorn. It's just one more way. Yeah. Yeah. So the other amazing thing is, the ageism, they say that, everybody says that, in Israel, there's huge ageism. And if you're past a certain age, you can't get a job. So I'd like to say that apparently that's not completely true, since I was able to get a job and I'm definitely over the average age.
I'm going to ask Mayor and Sarah both also to separately address this question, about working remotely, some of the challenges that might present. I know that Mayor enjoys his Sunday bike rides through the desert, which he might not be able to do if he was driving soccer practice in Baltimore. But you came to work remotely and do some commuting back and forth, and you knew that coming into it. But what are some of the challenges and the benefits of working American hours, aside from people, our listeners are thinking, yeah, well, it's American salary, so that's good. But that's a little bit separate than what the opportunities of the life that presents it from a lifestyle perspective, and some of the challenges that you might see.
Yeah. So Josh, when I first started this, I think one of the biggest challenge is they say there's nothing really like FaceTime, and so I was going back and forth every month, every other month, back to meet with some of our investors and so forth. And I was really concerned that with the distance that it would affect how the relationship. Obviously, Corona hit, where people were down the block from each other, didn't see each other, as what Sarah alluded to before. It kind of became the norm, almost to a point now where there's certain people that I feel like the relationship has been affected by not being in front of them. The majority of people I've reached out and said, hey, I'm going to be back in the States in a couple of weeks. You want to get together? And I'm like, if you want to, that's great, but we talk all the time by Zoom. Like, they were politely saying it's kind of okay if you don't, and that's pretty neat too, because I'm not overly anxious to have to get on a plane and go across the other end of the world. And one of the really, really, I guess, good blessings of COVID, if there are any of them, obviously the people that have been affected, and whether it's economically or family or anybody who's sick or who unfortunately passed away, goes without saying, that's unfortunate. But if there's any silver lining, for me personally, is that I've been home for 14 months, haven't left the house. We've, as a family, have been able to really grow and really, do things together. As Josh, as you alluded to, Sundays are great because it's, one of the things that people complain when they make Aliyah is they lose their Sundays. So I've been fortunate to kind of have my cake and eat it and be able to have my Sundays. Actually, the kids are in school, so it's like it's a two-for. They have school and I'm off of work. And so that's been great. I mean, should we tell them where we are? All right, secret for the people that are listening. We're actually in Breshit, which is a really beautiful, stunning hotel overlooking the Machtesh, which is basically Israel's version of the Grand Canyon. Really super special place. And again, today's Sunday, so we're fortunate to be able to be here, and I'm gonna take a day or two off. It's really, like I said, being able to work remotely, being in touch and staying connected to our office, to our investors, has really, been really easy this year for us.
So for me, we kind of play off each other. He tends to be Mr. Optimistic, and I'm just a little bit more, I would
realistic.
Say
Realistic.
I found the transition from being in person to remote working very difficult. Now, even though in my role in my company, I was working from home, my hours were, you know, typical American hours. My kids would go to school, I would work, my kids would come home, work would be done. And the transition to having to try and craft that time around being available for employees and questions that come in and your children, and not really having your nights to wind down, I found very difficult at the beginning. I really had to craft time for myself during the morning that I would normally take at, let's say, 10 o'clock at night, when some people fold their laundry, watch their Netflix, and, you know, wind down their day. I had to kind of reprogram myself to do that at 10 a.m., even though that wasn't what I was used to doing. So that took a lot of adjusting, not necessarily Netflix at 10 a.m., but more laundry and, you know, that kind of, it shifts your day. It shifts the way your days roll. I also found it harder. Mayor's more of a night owl. I'm not. So even though I could keep up with the workload by responding to emails either a day behind or getting ahead of work, and, you know, my employees waking up to emails from me, when you need to have conversations, they're late at night and you need to be on your game, and, you know, it's an adjustment. It's not impossible, but it's definitely an adjustment. And you kind of have to roll with it and give yourself a little bit of grace to try and figure out what works for you and how best to work it. When we got here initially, we had hired a babysitter to come at 6 o'clock to put the kids to bed, so I could, in my head, be sitting at my desk like I would be in the States at that time. And then we realized it just wasn't working, not for our family, not for my work. And it's a lot of adjustment.
Thank you. And Abraham, as our resident retiree, I'd like to hear a little. I'd like to hear. First of all, were you retired before you made Aliyah, or did you retire upon Aliyah?
No,
And then I was going to, as a follow-up, tell us a little about your retiree life here. What you've been able to take advantage of, things that you might not have been able to do in the States. Just, you know, a day or a week in the life of a Jerusalem retiree.
Okay, well, first of all, in Baltimore, I was working for 30 years as a controller in various in private industry with various different companies, as I was in charge of their accounting department. So that's what I was doing in Baltimore. When I came here to Israel, at that time discovered we were able to live off of Marcia's salary. So at that point, I had actually a chavrusa that back in Baltimore, who 17 years before me had made Aliyah. He was a very well-known person in Baltimore named Svi White. He was the first NWCP in charge of NWCP in Baltimore Northwest Citizens Patrol. And he moved to Beitar, and we were learning before he left. And when I got ready to make Aliyah here, he said, you know, I've been learning now at Or Sameach in the Chabura there for the 17 years since I've been here. I think you should come check out our Chabura. So that's what I did. I went to Or Sameach, and there's a group of 5 of us that are retired. Plus we have a Rebbe from Or Sameach, Rabbi Newman from there. And I started learning with this Chabura. And so I was reconnected with my chavrusa after a 17-year gap. And so that's what I do in the morning, is I learn with this chabura. And I have the privilege, again, because of our location, my favorite place to daven is Yeshivas Mir. And Mir is a 10-minute walk from where we live. So in the morning, that's how my morning starts. I walk over to Mir, I daven chakras at Mir. I come back and I go to my chabura. The chabura used to meet actually physically in Or Sameach until they started building their new base medrash there. And then they actually moved into our dining room here. for a year and a half because our Rebbe could not take the noise from the construction. He had very sensitive hearing issues. So we actually had our dining room turned into a base medrash for a year and a half until COVID came. And then once COVID came, so we had to separate. But we've been learning over Skype ever since then. And so that's how, I spend my morning up until mincha time. And then in the afternoon, I had found another kabura in the afternoon that I was going to, but because of COVID, that ended up breaking up also. So I have a lot of different things that I'm learning, Daf Yomi and other things that I'm learning. So I am able to spend a few hours in the early afternoon doing that. And then also Agudas Yisrael in America, they started with, when COVID started, a virtual Yarkei Kala program, which is from 11 to 1 o'clock Eastern time, and which works out to be 6 to 8 o'clock our time here, which worked out very well for me. So now I've been learning with this Aguda program from 6 to 8 o'clock in the evenings. And in between, while Marsha had her job with the US company, I was doing the accounting work for her company. We have a company here in Israel that does all of the tax filings and all of the complicated Israeli, American different things that we had to deal with for tax purposes. So we do have a very good accounting firm here. In fact, I interviewed about 7 different companies before I found one that I felt really knew how to handle both our unique situation in Israel and in America. And but I was doing, in between my learning, I was doing the accounting for that, and that's basically how my day goes here.
That sounds like you've been able to keep yourself quite busy.
Yes,
I'm impressed with your stamina.
Yes, thank God I'm staying quite busy, and I just find it such a bracha to be living here in Israel and to be able to take advantage of all of the resources that are available here. It's and when I always talk about how the building that we live in, when there's a staircase that goes down to Or Sameach from our building, and it's a Yerushalmi style building with these archways, a very, very Yerushalmi look. And that's what I walk through to get to Mir in the mornings. And every morning I just turn to Hashem, and I thank Hashem that I have this privilege of, I never dreamt that I would be able to actually be living in Yerushalayim and have our own apartment here. And it's just a real bracha.
Amazing. I'm going to pitch back to the rest, since that was our retiree segment. I want to hear a little bit about your kids' adaptation. There's this ongoing myth that is a super myth, which will probably never die, that kids by the time they get to their first Hanukkah have Hebrew, and it becomes clear very quickly that that's not the case. Somebody mentioned earlier today, yeah, but definitely have Hebrew by Hanukkah, just a matter of which Hanukkah it ends up being. But sometimes it's Purim, sometimes it's Pesach. People who made Aliyah in summer of 2019, right when their kids were starting to get their feet under them, the rug got pulled out from under them, and now many of them are still struggling since it's been such a difficult year and a half of school. But I'd like to hear a little bit about how your kids adapted, maybe some tips on how you might be able to help prepare kids prior to Aliyah, and maybe a quick tip, what some of your experiences that you could help people avoid pitfalls for their kids in both preparation. I knew you were going to do that.
Okay, so I think the biggest thing is it's two things. Number one is the child's age when they come, and number two is their circle of friends. We have 3 kids who were 9, 7, and 2 when we moved. Yeah. And each one of them had a very different experience. And I believe it was connected to those two conditions. Our 2-year-old went into Gan her first day. She didn't speak a word of Hebrew. We had tried at home, but she was 2. So there was, very little that she was getting. And that was really hard. And her Ganenet actually sat there with Google Translate on her phone and had my daughter speak into the phone so she could be understood for about the first 2 weeks, which was ridiculous on one level and also amazing that the Ganenet just said, you guys made Aliyah, you guys are awesome. We're going to help you however we can, even if it means sitting here having, your kid talk into an app so I can understand that, she needs to go to the bathroom.
Good thing Google Translate works pretty
God
quickly.
bless,
Yeah.
God bless. I will say for our 2-year-old, by Hanukkah, she was speaking Hebrew. The myth did come true for her. But
Didn't you wake up in the middle of the night one time screaming in Hebrew?
Yeah,
You were like, oh
yeah.
my God,
within
my
a month,
child's possessed.
yeah, within about a month and a half, and it was kind of creepy, but kind of awesome. So that's a 2-year-old. They're a sponge. They pick it up, and she was immersed in a Hebrew-speaking Gan. Our 7-year-old went into a class, also fully Hebrew-speaking class. We sent both my 7-year-old son and my 9-year-old daughter to Hebrew-speaking schools, and we had spoken with the schools. They had support for the Olim Chadashim. So my kids were getting taken out, and they had Ulpan twice a week. But my 7-year-old found a lot of friends on the playground, and he knew that if he wanted to play soccer, he needed to learn Hebrew. And I would say by Hanukkah, he had, a good command.
You knew how to say goal.
By Pesach, which was challenging because, right before was when Corona kind of hit. By Pesach, he was really speaking Hebrew. He has friends who are Israeli, who don't speak a word, and they come over to the house. And he really...
A word of Hebrew, of English.
A word of English, right. A word of English. Our 9-year-old, first of all, she's a girl. I think that does make a difference socially. And she was older. So she gravitated towards a couple of other English-speaking girls in her class, and that became her group. And it took her a while longer than the other two to really feel comfortable in Hebrew. She is now a year and a half in, including a year on Zoom school, and she's able to fully follow a class in Hebrew. But I think coming as a 9-year-old, English will always be her mother tongue, and she will always feel more comfortable in English. That's my assessment. I could be proven wrong. But I see that, that's her comfort zone. She can step out of it, and she does step out of it, and she excels. But it is her comfort zone.
I've seen that. I'll share with I have 6 sons, and we came, my oldest were 4 and 2. But I've seen over the years that girls communicate more. Not surprising to anybody listening.
As I sit here yapping my brains out.
I think
and that not all boys, but many boys, they just, as your son did, just want to go play soccer or basketball or beat each other up, whatever boys do. And you don't need to talk that much for that. You can adapt more quickly because you can get the words of the playground very quickly. The girls sometimes take a little bit longer, even though they're more verbal. It's a little bit more hesitant because they have to talk. They don't get just to kick or run or shoot a basketball. So I've seen that over the course of my quite some time here. But So I think you'll be surprised when she gets back to school and there's actual Hebrew all day long. You might have a very different 15-year-old than you expect, in a good way.
I would love that. I really would.
Um,
I want my kids to speak English in the home and to sound American, ideally. I don't know that at all.
She'll
I
tell a
don't
quick
know.
story.
No, no stories.
No stories?
Um,
People love stories, huh?
you can tell them a quick story.
Okay, no story.
I would love that, just because for me, that's something that I would like them to maintain a good command of English. But if my kids speak Hebrew amongst each other and amongst their friends, and I think that's the sign of a successful Aliyah. I don't see that as something that would upset me.
Just
I
want
wouldn't
to add
think
just one thing. I think it's really important in terms of the community, what you're looking for, because we're very fortunate in the Gush. There's a great, and you'll hear a lot of times people are considering Aliyah, that everybody's looking for a soft landing. And I know that there's many different directives of Nefesh B'Nefesh, where people are going north, people are going south, going into more Israeli kind of communities. And I think we kind of picked, I would say, kind of like a hybrid. So there's a very strong Anglo community, but it's also the Anglo community. What I get a sense is that they very much want to acclimate, want to be Israelis, want their children to speak Hebrew. Over Pesach, we met somebody from Beit Shemesh whose kid was born here in Beit Shemesh, and he speaks Hebrew like an American, talks like an American, davens like an American, and that's what he wants for his children. And his older children are in American yeshivas. His daughter, I think, is in seminary here in Israel, and that works for some people. But I guess the point I'm making is you really want to decide in terms of the community you live in. What do you want from your family? Do you want your families to be? Do you want your kids to be Americans that are living in Israel? Do you want them to be Israelis? And that's really important when you're deciding the community that you're living in. That's kind of my thought, a comment, I should say.
We just had a question pop up, which I think is relevant. This is more of an adult question. Can you each speak to your level of Hebrew and how that helps, hinders you, et cetera, both in the workplace, socially, in your just day-to-day life? Marcia, what do you got?
So there's a big myth that, if you live in Yerushalayim, you don't need to know Hebrew. You can manage just fine with English, right? You laugh, right? That's a lot of people say that. I'd like to say that is categorically not true. I don't feel so anyway. I feel you absolutely need to know Hebrew. I did go to Ulpan for 9 months. I am an Ulpan dropout. After 9 months, I was done. Between working full time and going to Ulpan, which was 8:30 in the morning till 1:30 in the afternoon. And then I started work right after that, as soon as I got home, and then worked till 11 o'clock at night. After 9 months, I was totally burned out. I just could not do that anymore. I never could do the homework. It was all I could do to hang out in class. Homework was like way beyond me. However, I do feel, and I tell everybody, what I feel I learned from Ulpan was the ability to listen to Israelis speak and just deal with it. Like I either understand it or I don't, but the speed at which they talk, I don't really care. It doesn't make any difference. I'm not one of these Americans who's always going, la'at, la'at, right? Because they can't deal with the speed of Hebrew. It doesn't really make that much difference to me. My Hebrew has definitely gotten much better since I've been here, because again, I don't feel like you could manage in English, even in Yerushalayim, which is probably, outside of Ramat Beit Shemesh, about as, heavy in the English as you're going to get. You need Hebrew for any number of things. You needed to deal with the grocery store. You needed to deal for sure, Bezek with your internet. That's all in Hebrew. I haven't been able to do that in English. Tried desperately, but failed. Because I never, it's such a joke here. I mean, it literally is a joke, and it's exactly true, that when you call Bezek or you call your health insurance, you call your Kupa, it'll be like, it's press 1 for Hebrew and 2 for English and 3 for Arabic and 4 for Russian, right? Which is great. You're so excited. So you press 2 for English, so that's so nice. And then you get somebody on the phone and you say, Slicha, efshar ledaber ba'anglit? Excuse me, is it possible to speak in English? And they're like, no, tamtini b'vakasha, and they put you on hold.
Forever.
And then, and you can go through, you could laugh, right? Because you've been there, done that, right? I literally did this. I needed to make an appointment. I literally went through 6 operators who all told me they couldn't speak to me in English. Finally, I just gave up and said, you know what, forget it. I'll just make the appointment in Hebrew and we'll be done with it. And eventually that's what you have to do. You just have to sort of like grit your teeth and speak in Hebrew and make a lot of boo-boos and embarrass yourself, you know, completely, because that's what you're going to do because you sound like an idiot. But that's how you learn. And the company that I work in now, when I interviewed, they said, "Oh, you'll like this company because this is an Anglo company. It'll be so easy for you." Yeah, it's not so Anglo. The work predominantly that everybody else does is in English, but I'm the manager of the help desk there. Everybody who works for me is Israeli, and they all speak Hebrew among each other. And if I couldn't understand at least the Hebrew, sometimes I answer them in English, but I understand their Hebrew, I couldn't manage it all. So Hebrew is vastly important. Is it harder to learn when you're older? Yep, it absolutely is, but it's doable. You just have to speak. That's the biggest thing. You just have to do it.
We've had many people say over the years that they're Ulpan dropouts, but I've never had anybody make that point. And I think it's really important, the key point you made, that the ability to listen to Hebrew, that you can pull from Ulpan. You might finish Ulpan, you might not move up a level, like, you know, there's a promise you move up a level in Ulpan, you know, if you go through the whole thing. But if you set realistic goals for yourself, you know, a 5-month Ulpan is not going to make anybody who's not already pretty strong in Hebrew fluent in Hebrew. That's somewhat mythical. That's just like educationally impossible for the vast majority of people. But I think that your point is really important. Being able to understand and to take in Hebrew and not be intimidated by somebody speaking to you or at you is really an important piece. And I found in my case there's many points where I have somebody speak Hebrew to me, but their English is actually good enough to listen to and speak back. We'll have the Hebrew English conversation back and forth. Doing that with our second oldest son, who has a serious girlfriend who understands Hebrew fluently but refuses to speak. So I made a happy medium with her.
It was worth coming on this show just to hear the great news, Josh. Who knew?
So I think it's a really nice point. I appreciate you bringing that up. Rasmus, what's your Hebrew?
So I've been fluent for years. I was very fortunate to go to really good day schools, and with all of my cousins who live here, I was fluent before we came.
Wow.
At least speaking. What I've found has developed and has gotten stronger is my reading ability and my ability to respond, especially in writing, to WhatsApps, which you absolutely need to survive with kids in any school here. I think each one of my children has about 8 different WhatsApp groups for their various stuff. I remember like the first week we got here, I got a WhatsApp for one of the classes, and Mayor was saying something to me, and I'm like, you need to be quiet. I'm trying to read this text message. And it took a lot of thought and focus. Now I can go about my day and see him and respond and shoot off a quick response a year and a half later. But to me, the hardest was the reading and the responding. Verbal, I was great with, but the reading is definitely a challenge and something that I took on to say from the beginning, I want to get better at this. I do think it's something that you have to want. If you don't want to, then, I mean, there are probably ways to get around it and where you don't have to, but it was something that I wanted to take the bull by the horns.
Thank you.
The only thing I'd add is just my suggestion is for the folks that are listening back in the old country, is to really, you know, it's all about the experience. You know, as Sarah said and Marcia said, you can get by. You know, there's always somebody, even if you wait on Bezek, at some point somebody will come on the line. It may be a couple of days later, but somebody will come on the line and go, I could help, but it's not so good. You'll get that too. But if you want the full experience, then it's really what you put into it. And so if you're listening back in the States, my suggestion is, you know, whatever media you want to listen to, try to listen to as much Hebrew. And it kind of, you you know, soaks in at some point. And so whether it's listening to the news, YouTube videos, you know, down, you know, I'm not making any, you know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Political statements.
Political statements, but anything, especially with the subtitles, if you can watch Hebrew and English subtitles, it's great, because then after a while you catch yourself, you're actually just listening and it's picking up. So, you know, again, if you want to really immerse into the culture, you want to immerse into the country, and you don't want to be that European grandfather that spoke with the accent that we all grew up with, that, you know, from the old country, you know, we're always reminded that we're going to be that, you know, we will always have the accent, we will always not be the Israelis, no matter how long we're living here. And so, you know, we want to make that as less awkward for our children and grandchildren as possible.
That was a great pro tip, because it's not all that old pond. There's other ways, especially these days with all sorts of different media available.
Mayor's a big believer in learning through osmosis. He just turns up. No, I joke about it, but the truth is, when we got here, he turned on the radio and said, I'm getting about 40%. He said, my goal is at the end of the first year, I'm going to be at 80%. I was like, that seems ambitious. He hit about 65, and now he's about 80, 90. And it's just from listening.
I will say that having Israeli grandchildren is one of the best ways to learn Hebrew, in my personal humble experience. We have grandchildren that speak English, and we have grandchildren that don't speak English. They understand it, but they don't speak it. So the nice thing about grandchildren, especially,
It's a very good incentive for you guys.
Totally. But besides that, the nice thing about, you know, a 4-year-old's Hebrew is that I could probably deal with his vocabulary, right? We're not going to have a lot of deep, meaningful conversations with a 4-year-old where I'm going to have major challenges with the vocabulary. So it's fantastic for your Hebrew, because I can speak and we can have conversations back and forth. And they also don't care about your grammar. They don't really care. You mess up your grammar, you know, it doesn't make any difference to them.
Our kids practice all the time. You know, that's it's very humbling, I should just say, it's incredibly humbling, because, you know, you're in America, you're somewhat successful, you can walk into Target and communicate, you know, and then you come here and then you're trying to talk to the person at, you know, Rami Levy, and your daughter's like, oh, no, it's not this, it's this, it's that. It's like, correcting. I mean, yesterday I called, we were looking to rent a bike, and I couldn't remember how to say shocks. And I'm asking my 9-year-old, I'm like, how do you say shocks on a bike? And he like screams out the answer. And I'm like, I'm 50 years old, and I'm asking my 9-year-old son how to speak. It's humbling, but it's kind of cool too.
Yeah, it's very humbling.
I want to wrap up with one.
It's very humbling when you're speaking to your grandchild in Hebrew, and just as a joke, so I said to him, so does Bubby speak Hebrew? I say to the child in Hebrew, and they go like, no, she doesn't. What?
I want to wrap up with just throwing one nice question out to you guys. I want to hear what each of you think is your most pleasant surprise from your Aliyah. Something you didn't expect, something that you might not have thought about, something little, something big, something in between. What's something that you found, you realized about Aliyah, about Israel, about Israelis, that you might not have expected, that just like a nice little pleasant surprise? Wow, you're pondering. Go ahead, Mayor.
I can tell you that in America, there's always been this perception that, you know, things in Israel are backwards, and things are primitive, and it's a third world country, and, you know, people are rude, and you don't get the customer service. And you know, I joke around, and I'd say that, you know, this was more a case about 3-4 months ago, maybe not in our current political climate we are here in Israel. If I would have told somebody 20 years ago, one day Israel is going to be more politically stable and more organized in terms of putting out a vaccine, or in terms of having an end to Corona ahead of America, you would have laughed and said, you crazy, like Israel? But it's unbelievably, it's really cool to be living in a country that we call the vaccination. You know, this is the country that got the vaccine right. This is a country that when push comes to shove, they get things done here. And you know, there's a lot of things in modern life, and you know, whether it's an app or whether it's ordering your groceries online here, there's a lot of things that are perception, things a lot more difficult here. And I've seen that things here and the quality of life and sometimes the quality of even materialism is a higher quality here in Israel than it is in the United States. That to me was a surprise.
Grants, got anything for us?
So I think for me, I was very nervous about making Aliyah, I have to say. My husband was more enthusiastic and gung-ho about making Aliyah than I was. I think it always works that way with couples, right? One is more, one is less, you know, it usually works that way. My husband was definitely more. I was very, very concerned about how long it would take me to really acclimate. Even though we'd been coming here every year, I would come at least once a year. We would come for Sukkot every year. I try to sneak in a Hanukkah here and there too, for 12 years. So we'd come often, but even so, I was very concerned about how long it would take me to make and really feel at home. And I was very shocked at how quickly it actually occurred. That it really took very little time for me to feel very comfortable here, that I could grocery shop and I made friends and I really, you know, I made a life here. That's one of the reasons that, and I tell this to everybody, don't wait to make Aliyah until you're too old to do it. Make Aliyah when you can make a life for yourself, where you still have the ability to go out, make friends, do things, go places. If you wait too long, you're not going to be able to do that, and it's a complete waste. So even though it's a challenge to make Aliyah, but the earlier you make it, the younger you are, the easier it's going to be for you. Even if you're close to retirement age, don't say, well, I'm going to wait till I get retired. You know, just do it, because then you'll have the ability to make a life for yourself. And I was shocked at how quickly I really felt at home here.
Wow, I think that's a great closing message. I've been at Nefesh for 12 and a half years, and it's very rare that somebody would say, wow, I wish we'd have waited another 3 or 4 years to make Aliyah. It's especially true for those who come as retirees, you know, whether they're a little bit younger or a little bit older. You know, many people are following their kids when they make Aliyah as older people. And all of them, if they wait past their immediate retirement, will say, wow, we really lost the opportunity. We lived such a rich life, but we could have lived it so much richer had we been here for 5 more years. We didn't need that extra 5 years in the States. So I think Marcia, is a very beautiful way to end our conversation today. I thank both the Rasmuses and the Grants for sharing their time with us. I want to tell everybody out there listening, we will get back to our kind of more topless, regularly scheduled programming starting next week about taxes and healthcare and shipping and paperwork and all those things you have to do to get prepared for Aliyah. But we do want to keep these conversations with relatable people, whether it's people from your community, whether it's people who have the same career as you do, people in the same life place that you are in. It's a nice way for people to kind of see the forest through the trees, because as my wife said, 6 months before Aliyah were way harder than the 6 months after Aliyah. You know, the saying goodbye and the fear of the unknown and the paperwork and the packing and all these things, you know, they finish and then you come. And I think that's a lot of the message that we heard both from both of our couples here. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And we look forward to assisting all of you out there to follow your dreams home. Have a great day.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.